Since I met the creepy truck driver, I watch what I wear in my neighborhood. This happened a few months ago in March of 2016. One day in March, I left my house because I needed to take the bus in order to get to my classes. I'm in college. I didn't like what I was wearing, and I already walked up a big hill in my neighborhood and almost about out of it. I decided to call my boyfriend and ask him to bring a pair of sweatpants because I felt uneasy with my outfit and it gave off a bad feeling. Within 5 minutes of hanging up the phone with my boyfriend, a white truck drives slowly behind me. When I turned around to see who it was, the driver drove slowly next to me. This is how the conversation went with the creep truck driver.
"Hello, you look very gorgeous. I just wanted to let you know. Do you need a ride?"
Considering I didn't like what I was wearing, this made me feel like a prostitute, but I politely declined, stating that I have a ride.
"Are you sure? Because you look cold."
I politely declined again, stating it was alright and I will be fine. After the second try, he gave up. Or so I thought. I immediately called my boyfriend and told him to stay on the phone with me until I at least get on the bus. When I turned the corner to walk down a street to get to the bus stop, I saw garden workers, and in front of the truck was the creepy truck driver parked, waiting for me. When I got close enough to his truck once again, he asked me if he could give me a ride using the same excuse about it being cold outside. I politely declined him for the third time. Once I got on the bus, I hung up the phone with my boyfriend and I called my best friend. As I was explaining what happened, I noticed the creepy truck driver following the bus. He followed the bus for about 15 minutes until the bus broke down and police came on the bus for a different reason. A second bus came, so I did end up making it safe to school. A week after the creepy truck driver tried getting me into his car, my parents went to see a show and my brother was working, so I was home alone with my dog. An hour after my parents left, I heard my dog going crazy, the doorbell ringing non-stop and lots of knocking. I looked out the window and it's the stupid truck driver. He didn't see me though because I peeped through the blinds. By the time I called my neighborhood patrol, he was gone, but they watched my house for a few days. Thinking that was the last straw because now it's May in 2016 and nothing had happened for a few good months. That is, until last week when I was with my best friend walking to Taco Bell. We noticed a red truck driving very slowly. I looked at the driver and guess who? It's the stupid, creepy truck driver, and he just smiled and waved with his new truck. I don't know how Mr. Creepy Truck Driver knew where I lived, or knew which way I took the bus. This all gives me the chills.
Number 5.
Well, first of all, this all happened when I was in the 9th grade. I had matured early, so I received a lot of gross comments in 7th to 9th grade. This made me lose confidence in myself, so instead of being very sociable and outgoing like I used to be, I was shy and awkward. I had 0 friends, literally 0. So teachers often came up to me and asked if I was lonely and just showed interest in me because I seemed depressed or whatever. My English teacher's name was Mr. Z. He had the creepiest blue eyes, and his smile was even creepier. On the first day of school, he asked us all about ourselves, what our favorite subject was, our names, etc. But he always called on me, even though I never raised my hand. When he asked me, I would speak quietly because everyone stared at me and it made him laugh. He used to call me by my name and then followed with Goodheart. Towards the middle of the year, I noticed that he showed me a lot of favoritism. If he took away our privileges to go to the bathroom, he would say something like,
Take this to the office.
And then whisper,
Go to the restroom if you have to.
when we received our progress reports, I would have A's on assignments I had never done. I never told anyone about that because English was a class I had to pass in order to graduate. As the school year went on, I started to realize that he never looked at me in the eyes. He would stare at my chest, then my legs, at the floor, etc. But when he did look at me, he barely blinked, which made me look away instead. It was very awkward. When I first noticed him blatantly staring at my chest, I didn't think much of it at the time because I'm not very blessed in the chest, so guys usually look at my butt instead. I just figured there was something on my shirt, the first few times anyway. Towards the end of the year, he started asking me to come to his room during lunch so I could help him grade. When I came to his room, we'd have a movie on and we'd watch that for my lunch. He didn't have to teach a class after, so he let me skip my class afterwards. One thing I noticed right away was that there were sex scenes in every movie we watched. He'd ask me if I wanted to skip and I'd shrug because I wanted to act mature. It started to happen every day. We'd watch a movie every day which all had very awkward sex scenes. At the end of the school year, we watched our last movie and this time the scene was very long and very detailed and very awkward. He put his hand on my leg gently and laughed.
It'll be over soon.
He kept his hand on my leg for the whole thing. Luckily, when the bell rang, I left. I didn't say bye, I just left. The reason why I share this is because I saw him at Petco, my job, a week ago. I didn't think he'd recognize me. I was helping one line of people which had about 5 people in it, and my co-worker was working with a line that had 2. He stood on my line and waited for everyone to finish, even though the other line was empty. When I took his things, avoiding eye contact the whole time, he stared at me. I didn't look up because I didn't want to meet his gaze. Towards the end of the transaction, he started asking me about my life. Did I like my job, how my family was doing, etc. I just gave him short, simple answers while he drilled a hole into my face with his eyes. After we were finished, he smiled and said,
I'll be back again, good heart.
After freshman year, he was no longer a teacher at my school. I never found out why.
Number 4.
So before I begin, perhaps a bit of background information would help you understand my story. I'm a now 20-year-old male living in the Netherlands and I've been a geek all my life. Games in particular have always played a major role in my life, starting when I got my first PlayStation when I was 5 years old. Something about gaming just always got to me. Be it mechanically or in terms of storytelling, I could always find something to love about it. As I grew older, I got more and more into RPGs and eventually found my way onto World of Warcraft. As I got more involved in the game, I started joining raiding guilds. For those of you who don't know, it's basically a group of players who are intent on facing the game's hardest content as a team. The second guild I joined was the greatest bloody team of people I had met thus far. One of these people was a Swedish girl who was around my age, called Maggie. We got along quite nicely, as it turned out her mum, who was also in this guild, was actually living in the Netherlands. So often, we'd end up in conversation where she asked me to teach her some Dutch, and she'd teach me some Swedish in return. It was all good fun. Fast forward to the beginning of 2013. The aforementioned guild had fallen apart a while back and I had joined a new one. I had stayed in touch with some people in the old guild, but Maggie really hadn't been online all that much. When she did get back online, we quickly caught up. It turned out that she actually moved in with her mother and had spent the last couple of months improving her Dutch and attending a high school. She also started dating this guy called William, who was actually part of this same guild I had met Maggie in. He always struck me as a nice guy. Other guild members always thought that he was a bit direct and perhaps rude. But being Dutch, I understood that's just simply how our culture works, so I was always okay with it. June comes around. Me and Maggie recently finished our final exams and were waiting for the results to come back in. One afternoon, while we were playing online, I suggested a meetup between the two of us. I really didn't have much to do, and given that she had voiced her concerns about finding her footing in Dutch social circles, I figured this was a nice opportunity to take her first baby steps into the country. She excitedly agreed and asked if she could bring William as well. Obviously, I said yes, seeing as he was her boyfriend. Meetups are safer when you arrive as a couple, and meeting former guild members was something I was looking forward to anyway. A couple of days later, I met both of them in Rotterdam and had a great day. I showed them around the city since I knew it best, but had some nice conversations, a few laughs, and we ended the day by taking a trip to Euromast. Before leaving, Maggie had to go to the bathroom, so me and William were waiting outside. Striking conversation, I said to him, "You two make for a nice couple."
Thanks,
he replied.
I friggin' love her, you know. Honestly, wouldn't know what I would do without her at this stage.
Back then, I didn't think much of that statement. It's just a thing people say when they are in love, so kudos to him, right? Maggie got out of the restroom, we said our goodbyes, and we parted ways. A few weeks later, we got our exam scores back. I had passed high school with flying colours, but Maggie, she wasn't so lucky. She had failed most of her exams. She told me she was going to be studying for the rest of the summer in order to properly prepare for the rerun of the last year of high school. I told her that if she needed any help that I was willing to see what I could do, even if I was going to college. She was very thankful and assured me that she'd let me know if she needed any help. Fast forward again to September. After our last conversation, Maggie had practically disappeared off of the internet. She hadn't logged into World of Warcraft. She was never on Skype and wasn't even online on Facebook anymore. I had asked William in mid-August how she was doing, and he assured me she was fine, so I thought nothing of it. I even admired her focus on her education. However, during my second week in college, all of that changed. I got into the metro and picked up a free newspaper in the seat next to me to pass the time. I vividly remember turning to the fourth page to read a headline saying, "Swedish woman, 19, from city, stabbed in own backyard." It took me a few seconds to even realize that she lived in that city now, and that she was 19. Even though the article didn't mention a name, I grew very concerned. I quickly sent her a text message as we exchanged phone numbers when we met up, asking her if she was okay. The rest of the day went by, and I heard nothing from Maggie. I eventually figured that if anything had happened to her, people would have most likely started posting things on her Facebook page. Concerned and scared of what I was going to find, I started typing her name into the search bar of Facebook. Sure enough, it was already filling up with messages from people that heard she'd passed away from her injuries. After inquiring with some of the former guild members, it turned out that William, he had stabbed her. She had broken up with him after she got her horrendous test results back, and he wasn't all too pleased with that. In the aftermath of the incident, me and some of the other Dutch guild members went to her city to meet up with her friends from school, attend the memorial set up in her school, and put some flowers at the scene of the crime on behalf of everyone she had played the game with. When we met up with Maggie's school friends, we found out that William, he hadn't been half as nice as we thought he was. During the relationship, he had been very controlling of Maggie, and after the breakup, he began stalking her and sending her threatening text messages. She even went to the police to report it, but they told her that they couldn't do anything for her at that stage. After that, she met a different guy and started dating him. William found out and, well, took matters into his own hands. Thinking back on this, the worst part of all of this just came to mind. When we put the flowers at the scene of the crime, we stood around for a few minutes, contemplating whether or not we should knock on the door and personally give her mother our condolences, given that we kind of knew her as well. We decided against it, given that we might unintentionally remind her mother that Maggie's online connections ultimately cost her her life. As soon as we got back to our car, we saw Maggie's front door open. Out of the door came her mother with Maggie's younger sister. I knew at the time that Maggie had a younger sister, but I did not know that she was only 6 or 7. I fucking lost it when I saw her little head hanging down while grabbing hold of her mother, scared to go around the corner to face all the drawings and flowers people had left there. In sharing this story, I found a very recent article that said William is most likely going to prison for 20 years. Honestly, William, I fucking hope you never make it out of there.
Number 3.
So, this happened a while back when I was in my early 20s. I was working at a little retail store in my town's mall. It was coming up to the end of half of the day, and I don't know how I noticed, but an older man, probably 50s, I'm not sure, had walked past my store about 3 or 4 times. Not consecutively, just every now and again. Now, I worked in one of those little costume jewelry stores, so it was odd for an older male to be walking past so many times, but I kind of didn't think anything of it. I don't even know how I picked up on it in the first place. It came to closing time, and I had left to catch my bus home at about 6:30 p.m. I remember it was transitioning into winter because it was dark out by then. I'm a very paranoid person. I still live by the stranger danger rules. So, even now when I leave work, I make sure I change into an outfit less fashionable. I don't like drawing attention to myself in any way possible, so I try to make sure I'm as covered up and average looking as I can be. I don't know why, but I have this disease where I attract all the wrong attention for no reason at all. So, as I said, I was waiting for my bus home. I was sitting by myself at the town centre's bus terminal, and guess who walks past? The older man. At this point, I kind of felt a little uneasy, but in my head I tried to make reason prevail, as many people take buses all the damn time. My bus showed up and I got on, and well, you can all probably guess who got on after me. I remember sitting in the seats facing inward, the ones for wheelchairs and prams, and he sat at the first seat above the steps. I remember staring forward and feeling his eyes burning into me. I kept trying to use my peripheral vision to see if he was looking at me, but not wanting him to know I noticed him. The whole bus ride, I waited to see if he got off before my stop, thinking it was just my over-anxious paranoid mind working overtime, until I pressed the button for my stop. I waited until the last possible second to press it, and as I stood up, he did too. I went to walk to the front door of the bus, and he exited the rear. At that moment, as soon as he stepped off, I sat back down again. I had no idea where the bus went after my stop, but honestly, I didn't fucking care. I will never forget the look on his face as the bus drove off. I have never seen such hate and anger in someone's face than I did through that window. His face is burnt into my memory like a photograph. It still absolutely terrifies me to this day. I have no idea what would have happened to me if I got off the bus at my stop that night, but I'm glad my paranoia was so intense I didn't.
Number 2.
My boyfriend Dan and I had just started renting an apartment together, and money was tight. It was 2001. We were both in our early 20s. I couldn't find a job and relied on word of mouth to earn some cash wherever I could. I love to clean and organise, so I gave friends and family the go-ahead to give out my name and number to anyone who could use my help over the summer. Dan, his brother, and Dad all did carpentry work and also got work through word of mouth. None of them had too many exciting stories to tell, other than doing work in a hoarder's house or odd requests as far as cabinet design or placement. Dan got a call from an elderly woman wondering if he could come by and give her an estimate on finishing her kitchen. She said her husband died before he could install the cabinets and countertop that he purchased, and someone from her church gave her his number. He said absolutely and offered to come out the next day. She objected and said, "This needs to be done now. That's why I called. They said that you could help me. What am I supposed to do? I'm an old woman. I live alone. My husband died." Dan was a pretty chill guy and kept calm, explaining that I had his car and I wouldn't be home from running errands for a couple of hours, and by then it would be too dark for him to come out. Let me also note that although Dan had a soft, not very masculine voice, he was a big guy, about 6'4" and muscular. The old lady perked up and asked, "Will she be coming along tomorrow?" in the sweetest voice. Dan said, looking back, this should have been a red flag by the tone in her voice and the fact that she was so adamant about him coming right that moment. But as soon as she heard he had a girlfriend, she changed her tune and got excitement in her voice, asking about the next day like it was no problem for her to wait. He didn't see anything weird about it at the time and felt bad for her because he thought she must have been lonely and wanting company to talk to. The next day, we both head out to her house. We brought along a small bouquet of flowers that we got at the grocery store to give her. I figured she would enjoy chatting while Dan checked out her kitchen, and maybe I could come back with Dan and help her with other things around the house while he worked if she needed. Her township was about 45 minutes away, but I was excited to go because this township is known to have really awesome old houses and mansions. There are other normal subdivisions depending on what direction you drive in. My friends and I back in high school used to drive there just to cruise around and look at neat houses. When we pulled up to the old lady's house, I was eager to go inside because it was such a cute looking house from the outside, very fairy tale-ish, grey with white trim, with vines climbing up the side of the house. It was a shotgun style house, so it looked tiny from the front. The small lawn was overgrown and messy, but I thought it added to the charm of the home. We knock on the door and are greeted by a tiny elderly woman, shorter than me and I'm 5 foot. She had on a dirty nightgown and even dirtier slippers. She looked past me and smiled widely at me while reaching her bony hands out to grab my face. I hold up the flowers to deflect and say, "Dan wanted to bring you some flowers." She lost her smile, grabbed the flowers and said, "Kitchen's through here." She turned around to lead us, revealing a brown stain on the back of her nightgown. Dan and I look at each other and he makes a goofy grossed out face. I make a judgmental face back and swat his arm as if to say, "Be nice, she's an old woman." We walk through a dark living room, nothing really out of the ordinary other than the smell, which was like cigarettes, mold and body odor. We enter the kitchen and there's a closed door about 10 feet ahead leading to rooms further back into the house. There's a man sitting shirtless at the kitchen table in the corner. He was hairy and overweight with greasy hair down to his shoulders. The old lady said, "This is my son, Marcus." He was probably in his late 30s, early 40s. He said nothing, but stood up and took his bowl to the sink. Great, Marcus has no pants on. Just dirty, and I mean crazy dirty, tighty-whities with several holes around the waistband. I shoot Dan the same grossed out look that he shot me earlier. He jokingly shoots me back a judgmental look and swats my arm. I give him a "No, seriously, I'm creeped out" look, and he nods to acknowledge it. "So, what cabinets are you? Dan tried to ask but was interrupted with Marcus pointing to the flowers and asking the old lady,
Where those from?
She points to Dan, and Marcus snatches the flowers out of her hand, throws them in an open trash bag sitting on the floor, and walks out of the kitchen into the living room we just walked through. He just lost his dad, so I assumed he had some sort of mental disability and was being sensitive about another dude showing his mum attention. So where are the cabinets and countertop that you need installed? Dan asked the old woman. Oh, I thought you were bringing them, she huffed out, sounding shocked that he would even ask that. Ah, I'm sorry, I thought you said your husband bought them and you needed them installed, Dan said, confused and a bit nervous at how the woman is reacting. So you brought nothing? What is it you do? What is it you're going to try and sell me? She gets closer to Dan as she's throwing her hands up in disbelief and anger. Marcus comes quickly, stomping in at the sound of his mother's distress. Rushing in from the other door past the kitchen was another man, around the same age. Wonderful, this guy is in his underwear too. Fucking dirty tidy whities. This woman told Dan on the phone that she lived all alone. This new guy freezes just past the doorway and just stares at me, standing feet away. Marcus rushes forward and stands between us and his mother and pushes her out towards the living room. Both doors are blocked by the fucking tidy whitey twins. Dan scoots me behind him in an attempt to block me from both guys. We gotta be heading out now, he said calmly, hoping not to escalate things. We hear the old lady squawk out loud, "Ha!" from the living room. Marcus doesn't move. I'll see what I can do about the cabinets, Dan said as we inched forward. Marcus barely inches forward, but still blocks the way. I frantically tug on Dan's arm to get him to look over at the other guy, now with his hand down his dirty underrag, masturbating. And that's when my calm, chill boyfriend loses it. I've never heard him scream like this. He remembers growing up and his older brother taught him how to deal with bullies. Say some crazy, messed up shit to them and they'll be too stunned to react. Dan screams with rage. The last person to corner me got beat to fucking death. I'll fucking kill you, your fucking mum, if you don't get the fuck out of my way. My boys are gonna come gang rape your fucking skulls if you don't back the fuck off. Veins popping, spit flying. Marcus looked surprised and he rushed past us towards his brother. For a split second, we both thought he was going to attack Dan, so he instinctively threw up his fist to defend himself. Marcus pushes his brother into the other room and slams the door behind him. Dan and I hurry out of the house. I think the old lady was sitting in the dark in the living room, but I didn't stop to look around as we were scurrying out. We called the cops when we got home. Didn't have cell phones then. But nothing really came of it because they said they didn't really do anything wrong. He didn't expose himself. They didn't try to attack us. They agreed it was bizarre, but nothing that they could do about it. We asked around and no one knew these people, so we're not really sure how she got our number. I don't know if they were just mentally ill, if she lied on purpose to get us over there, or why things happened the way they did. It was just scary as shit, feeling boxed in and not knowing what these creepy, almost naked dudes were thinking. Ever since then, I tend to avoid going inside other people's houses, unless I really know them.
Number 1.
My friend suggested that I tell my creepy story here. I'm a 23-year-old female, and this story happened last summer when I was still in college and living in an apartment. I had 2 other roommates who lived with me. My one roommate, Allie, was originally from a city about 45 minutes from our school, so she went home a lot on weekends. My other roommate, Kate, and I were both from out of state, so we never really went home. So summer rolls around and Allie accepted an internship in her hometown and left for the summer. So it was just me and Kate. We both had internships in town and worked 40 hours a week, so we didn't really see each other except on weekends. My apartment complex was large and had an open layout, so everyone's front doors were accessible from outside. You didn't have to be buzzed in or anything. We lived on the first floor. We also had a lot of friends who lived in our same complex. We would often leave our doors unlocked during the day when we were home in case anyone popped in to say hi. It was a Friday, which meant I didn't have to go into work until noon. All the executives had meetings in the morning, and since I was an intern, I wasn't required to be there. Kate, however, still left at her usual time of 8:30, leaving the door unlocked. Nothing uncommon about that. She knew I would be up soon, plus it was 8:30 a.m. What could happen? I was getting ready for work in my bathroom with the door closed around 10 a.m. when I heard our front door swing open. I figured it must have been one of my friends wanting to borrow something, or Kate had left her lunch here. I waited a minute for my friend to yell my name or raid my fridge, but I didn't hear anything. I suddenly got a very uneasy feeling. I stuck my head out and didn't see anything initially. When I stepped out and turned towards the kitchen, standing in my kitchen was a middle-aged man with his back to me. "Excuse me, can I help you?" I yelled. The man turned around, looking very surprised to see me. He was holding a grocery bag with something in it. I couldn't see what it was. He stared at me for about 5 seconds before telling me he was the maintenance man and we had called about an issue with our sink. I immediately felt like an idiot for being so rude and thought Kate had put in a request and not told me. She had done this before. He then mumbled something along the lines of he didn't have the proper tools to fix the problem, so he would have to come back later. He then breezed past me and went out the door. Weird. I immediately texted Kate and bitched at her for not telling me that he was coming. She didn't respond, so I continued getting ready for work and left. Around 2 p.m, Kate called me on her break to explain that she never put in a maintenance request. I immediately got a very nervous feeling. She told me to call our manager's office and report it. I told my manager the story and he was not exactly very concerned and just blew me off. My apartment complex was pretty safe. The only time I ever saw a police car was to bust some idiots throwing beer bottles off their balcony. The rest of the day, I continued to rationalize to myself that the guy had been maintenance and he was just confused. By the weekend, I had basically forgotten about it. Kate left Friday night for the weekend, meaning I had the apartment to myself, which never happens, so I was pumped. This was around the time of the NBA playoffs, and our hometown team was playing Saturday night, so me and a few of my friends went to a bar to watch the game. My friends were taking an Uber, but were headed in a different direction than me, so I opted to walk. Taking the long way meant I was coming from the opposite direction of where I usually walked in from the parking lot. I could see my windows first from the street, then have to walk around and up a few steps to get to my front door. As I got closer to my apartment, I could tell that something was off with the windows. I could see Ali's window was just barely cracked open. First of all, Ali has been gone since May, and it was the end of June. Then, as I got even closer, I saw that the screen looked funny. It was sideways, like it had been popped out and then it had been put back in, upside down. Now listen, I'm not one to overreact, but I knew for a fact that that window had been closed before I left for the bar. So, I noped the fuck out of there and ran to my friend's apartment on the 3rd floor, where I called the police. I went down when they got there and reiterated the situation to them. They told me to go back to my friend's apartment and wait until they told me it was okay to come out. After about 2 minutes, the cops walked out with, you guessed it, the fucking weirdo who was in my kitchen the day before. The cop was holding this big-ass hunting knife in his hand. I really wish the police hadn't told me what I'm about to tell you, because it still haunts me. They found the creep hiding behind my couch in my living room, holding a hunting knife wrapped in a Kroger bag. And even creepier, had I not walked home and noticed the messed up window, I would have just walked in the front door from the parking lot unknowingly. I had a lot to drink that night, and I had just planned on going right into my room and passing out. I would have fallen asleep with this guy still in my apartment, and I know for a fact that he wasn't just planning on hanging out.